Since we do have programs that are maybe new in our state or need support increasing their scores, there is a set aside with this grant that allows programs to apply specifically to either obtain national accreditation or work on their first-time NCLEX passing scores. And grants are awarded on the yearly basis. If the situation changes and they're able to apply for the full grant, then they can do so in the following fiscal year. This year was outstanding response to our request for proposals. We have received 37 proposals. In my time at the board office, this has never happened before. We're closer to 40 than we are to 30. So this is outstanding response. Thank you to all institutions who have put in the work and the time to provide the information necessary for the a review committee to go through and learn wonderful things that are happening in our state in nursing programs and the things that are still needed. And that is why this grant is so important and much appreciated by the programs. The initial review of applications happened on April 2nd with staff from Academic Affairs Board Office, Workforce Development staff, Kansas Board of Nursing staff, as well as Kansas Hospital Association staff getting together, scoring all of the applications, and then providing a summary for you of what was found in the applications and what that committee would recommend for awards. Not to go through every application as a lot, we've summarized what the main ask was, what is the award amount, and just wanted to point out that we have 4 applications for accreditation support, which is a really great sign because that means we have new programs in our state opening and then going for accreditation. We also, that means that we are admitting more students, that we are increasing and hopefully closing the gap and the shortage in nursing that we are experiencing nationwide. We have 2 programs applying for the NCLEX score improvement application. And as you may have noticed over the years, that number has decreased and different institutions every once in a while experience that need for the NCLEX score improvement. But also a great trend is the institutions move off of that list very quickly to the full application. So they're doing a great job making sure that students are passing the first time through. And you will notice that the expenditures on these 2 kinds of applications are specific to the goal. So accreditation support only has accreditation expenditures. NCLEX score improvement has specific supports for students or faculty supports if they need more training to be able to help the students pass the first time. If you go to the next page, there's the list of all full applications and just a quick summary of what we've seen this year. Always Popular and Proven Effective Assessment Technologies Institute, or ATI, requests, many of them, and additionally other tutoring and test preparation services, Kaplan, or faculty providing tutoring to students outside of their contract time. There are many requests for salaries and stipends for faculty, new simulation faculty that is very important in the field to be able to provide simulation to students. We also had requests for medication dispensing systems. Programs are finding the way they teach medication dispensing is outdated, so they are wanting to purchase state-of-the-art machines that are found in hospitals, and that way students can get training on those new technologies before they go out for their clinicals and have to work in real world. Several requests for mannequins for simulation, especially popular were obstetric mannequins, other high fidelity nursing mannequins. And, you know, when we visit campuses, it's always really fun to see and sometimes talk to the patients that are in simulation labs. It's a great experience, and that allows the faculty to set up scenarios where there are specific symptoms or specific challenges that students have to then solve in their lab. Another popular item was IV equipment, and of course, professional development for both nursing education faculty and simulation. And many programs have pointed out that a lot of times this grant is the reason they're able to participate in state-of-the-art professional development and travel nationally, because everybody's budgets are tight, but with this additional funding, they're able to go and learn from each other, from the experts in the field, and they really appreciate that. With the assistance from our partners at the Board of Nursing and Hospital Association and Academic Affairs, the board staff has reviewed the proposals, and we submit the recommended awards to this group for discussion and approval, and I will stand for questions.
Well, Director Brown, this is Curtis. I do have a question. Is it fair to assume that the institutions requested grant amounts that are bigger than what is being recommended here? And
what do you mean?
Well, if so, I'm just curious. Can you give me a couple of bullet points as to the basis upon which how the I think you just explained part of this, but if say Washburn Tech were to come to me hypothetically and say, hey, we asked for 200,000, we got this, what's the broad-based response about the analysis that you did? You mentioned the scoring, but I'm not sure I quite understood.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the institutions submit a narrative where they explain their project, a budget where they outline what expenditures will happen based on the goals they've written in the narrative, and then they explain sustainability of the project. That means that past the life of 1 year of this project, how will they maintain these benefits to students and faculty? And so the review committee had provided a score for each of the institutions. And this year, we've actually did not cut any request unless it was unallowable. So for instance, every once in a while, we have a request come in that includes standard office supplies and not laboratory supplies. The things like and battery, things like that would be disallowed. So that could be a deduction to their grant, but then all of the allowable expenses would be funded. So that's one of the examples of why someone could receive less. On the other hand, when they have to provide a lot of documentation of what the actual costs are. So there are different circumstances, but essentially what is recommended is all allowable based on law.
Good. That's good news. Any other questions from the committee?
I would move to approve. If there are no further questions. Yeah.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Thanks, David.
May I ask if you would like this to be on consent or discussion for the full TEA?
What do you think, committee? Given how little discussion we had, and given that it sounds like the grants generally the applications generally were able to be fulfilled, I would think putting it on the consent agenda ought to be okay.
I agree.
Okay.
Agree.
Okay, so I think maybe the motion is for this committee to approve the placement of this item on the TEA's consent agenda at its next meeting, and that's been seconded. So unless there's anyone voting no to that, I'll pause and give you a chance to. I think the motion passes. Thank you for that presentation. So I think we'll move on to the next thing, and I'll definitely mute here, turn it over to David and Charmin, if that's okay, to talk about the task force.
Thanks, Chris. We had I felt like a good meeting 2 weeks ago, and I thank the institutional representatives for being there. I think we had a lot of good feedback, but are Marlon, Greg, Nancy, and Carla, are they on this morning?
Yes, they are.
Okay, that's good.
Mhm.
Well, I think we made some headway, and I wanted to start off as a TEA member. We approved these, and I think we did it in February. So the fees for the coming year have already been approved. So next February, I think what we need to see, and I'm open to other TEA members adding to this, but the institutions are going to submit fees that have changed, could be up, could be down. So we need a list by institution. And then let's just start with Allen County. Suppose Allen County next year has 5 programs they're going to change the fees on. I think we need to see the name of the program, the fees this year, the fees proposed for next year, the difference, and take a look at that way. Naturally, if there are large discrepancies, if there's a large increase or a large decrease, I'm sure we're going to have a question why. And so I don't know how all that data is gathered. I know we gather the fees, but I don't know if we gather why something has changed so much. It may be a matter of a phone call from staff, or maybe there's a place that they can put that information. So we're going to question that. I think we made a lot of headway last week on what the fee should be. There's certain things that are allowable to fees, and we want to look at required fees. Now, some of those required fees, the student may have the option to buy them somewhere else, but there's still materials or supplies or equipment that need to be required for that program. And that's what we need to see, and I think that's what we're approving. There may be optional items that the student could buy if they want, but they haven't been determined by the institution to be required to complete that program. Those are things that I question whether we need to take a look at those at all or not. So kind of 2 definitions of option there. Also, I think we need to look at by program, and Charmin's great at manipulating spreadsheets. So if we have a look at institutions in alphabetical order in their new programs, some of those programs, 5 of them may have widget making. So Charmin can probably manipulate that spreadsheet by program, and we can take a look at, are there any big discrepancies between programs? If somebody's considerably larger, considerably less, why is that happening? A good example, last week, someone mentioned they provide laptops for students and programs that need laptops. Another institution said, we do not provide those, they have to buy it. So that could be $1,000 discrepancy. Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to look at from program to program. So then one last thing that I don't think we collect, I think it would be good to collect, and it'd be good for us to know. I think it'd be good for the Board of Regents to know. I think it'd be good for legislators to know, because I think it's a positive thing, is how many of the fees are being paid by somebody other than the student? Are there programs where your college foundation or institutional foundation is paying all the fees for all the students? Are there programs where some of the fees are paid by business and industry? A business may say, hire a student and say, we want you to go through this training. We're going to pay your fees. They may not pay the fees for all of them, but they may pay for their employees. So I don't know if we gather that. I don't know if we want to gather that, but to me, that would be a very positive thing, because I think it runs into the tens of thousands and maybe the hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. And to me, it'd be good to know that. So those are the 3 things that seem to be the main emphasis. If there's others, I'd like to hear that from TEA members or institutions, but then I think we get to work, number 1, what are the required fees? And let's do it institution make sure each institution is doing it accurately so that we can have that information. So I'm open to comments.
Thanks, David. Good recounting. That's how I remember it too. Good meeting.
On that last item about looking how many fees are being paid by outside groups, maybe a foundation, or I think you mentioned business and industry. Is that information, Sharman, is that information available or now gathered by your group?
That is not something that we are currently collecting. Over the last couple of years, it's actually a specific fee category or type that the guidance has been, if the student does not get charged the fee, we don't want to submit that. We don't want that to look like the rest of the fees that are required and part of the minimums that someone needs to participate in a program. An idea that maybe we could float with regards to that is instead of trying to collect that specifically the same way that we collect the current fees and those structures, is an idea that we had is to see if institutions could maybe write up a narrative that explains things like some of the discussion items that we had last time. We have some fees that if a student breaks a window or destroys a book, this is a fee that then becomes realized for a student, but it is not something that the majority of students need to be concerned with. And there are extenuating circumstances that go along with those scenarios. We also maybe have this situation where we have a number of fees that are that we have another revenue source to pay for, and maybe include even, we estimate that X amount of dollars have been saved by students and parents with the fees that are picked up. For instance, Dave, you mentioned like our foundation. But maybe that would be a way to collect that information, the TEA to have knowledge of that, but not try to collect it by individual course, individual program, like we're doing with the required fees.
I know it's not anything that we're required to approve, and I don't want to, and I don't really want to even get into specifics, but I think an institutional narrative would be fine, and I want the institutions to weigh in on this. I just interested in that total dollar amount, because I think there are significant total dollars being contributed towards CTE, and I think it would be nice to know that, and I think it's positive PR for us, for the Board of Regents, for legislators, to know that foundations and local business and industry are picking up a lot of those fees, and I don't even need to know which fee. I'm just interested in the total dollar amount. And maybe it's something we want to leave alone. I don't know. I'm just interested in it.
Do we hear from our institutions, their response to that?
This is Marlon at Coffeyville. I would say there, I see, Member Rice, what you're asking for, and I do think that is good information from a legislative standpoint for them to see that there are other people with skin in the game when it comes to the career and tech ed that's happening across the state. I can't speak for the tech colleges. I do know that the community colleges, we've had various schools who have had some school districts that may be paying some of the fees, and especially I think in some of the lower socioeconomic areas of the state, you're seeing some school districts who are picking up that to ensure that there's kids that aren't being left out. I think you're seeing some in of the state, you're seeing business and industry that are stepping in and saying, hey, I'll pay those fees because I want those kids in a career and tech ed program. Going to be kids that are going to come work for my company in the future. And then I also see the schools working to leverage their foundations to get those fees paid for. And again, I think that in many cases is just to remove the barrier. I do think that's important for legislators to know. However, I think that if you go through and tell the schools, don't report fees that the student isn't actually paying, then it's going to make one school, we'll say school A, is getting no support from industry or somebody else paying the fees. And so their fees may look at, 100% here. And then maybe I'm getting fees covered. And so I don't report, I report zero. I'm going to make the other institution look bad. And you're going to look at that anomaly on these forms and you're going to go, why is Coffeyville at zero and, Cloud is at $100? And sorry, Amber, to single out Cloud, but I think that you want to see what the fees are in comparison between the schools. And I mean, just looking at the CNA, for example, you're going to see some differences based on, are you providing it in this manner or are you providing it in this manner? And I think that's where some of these anomalies lie. And I think if you add that and say, take out those numbers because somebody else is paying for it, is going to create more problems, in my opinion.
Marlon, would not the narrative begin to explain or cover that?
Either or raise, because I didn't hear that question.
Would not the narrative that David talked about cover that?
Yes, I agree with the narrative that that's probably the best avenue to do, is to add that narrative so that I'm still reporting the fee, but I'm adding that narrative so you can see, yes, my fee is being covered by an outside person. I agree with that.
Yeah.
From a tech college perspective, that we have several, sorry, this is Nancy Thompson, Flint Hills Tech. I like that, providing that data. However, is the goal to show potential students that are looking at the KBOR website what each program would cost? Because, for instance, we have a scholarship fund for high school students, but it only would cover maybe Emporia High students or North Lyon County students. We get students from all of the area high schools. Coffee County students may not qualify for that scholarship particularly. So if we're saying this is what it costs, but it'll be covered by a scholarship, that's not true for 100% of the students. So then how do we delineate that? How do we say it'll cover for if you're an Emporia High student, or it'll cover, is that something we would want to put in the narrative as well? That yes, we get support for this scholarship, however, it covers students in this, or I guess that's where it's different, where every college is different with their scholarships and what is paid. And we do have high schools that cover fees at our Garnett and Lockhart campuses. There are a few of the high schools that cover it, but not all. So that's where my concern would come into play on that. I don't hesitate to report that we have that support. That's not my hesitation. It's more of how does an individual prospective student view that data, and they come in and say, well, according to KBOR, it's paid 100%, when in reality it's not.
I think you're getting way more specific than what I want. I'm just wanting a total dollar amount, and it's going to be reported to us for our use. And I don't see that. I mean, we may report, it may get to the press that in the 26 tech or colleges that offer tech programs, that there was $1.5 million last year of fees paid for by various sources. I don't see that we delineate where those sources are. I don't see that we delineate which institution they come from. And in your concern, you're recruiting materials and you're recruiting as students, and everybody else's doesn't change. So I don't think that should be an issue. Just
Well,
my
I agree. That sounds right to me, David, but it sounded like Marlon was saying that unless at some level we have a line of sight to those costs at a more specific kind of institutional level, we're going to have disparities that appear in the data. And so, right, Marlon, unless we capture what the fee is, and then we would need to know that, oh, by the way, this would be the fee, but it's actually being offset in some other way.
Yeah,
Isn't that?
I think the whole purpose of not just the whole purpose, but part of the reason for these discussions is to eliminate the confusion from the list, very similar to what Nancy was talking about, where you do something for one school versus another school, depending upon if they're within your area or where they're located. May have industry that say, hey, if you're going to Caney Valley, you're going to get, we're going to cover this, but if you're going to Field Kinley, you're not. So I think you're going to always have those types of things, and anything we can do to kind of eliminate those differences so it doesn't make one school look like they're overcharging a student versus another school. They're to eliminate those differences and try to get as transparent with the numbers, because I think that goes back to the parents. And I've heard Member Frederick say this before, is we want people to know when they sign up for a course what the course is going to cost. And if they're going to KBOR's website or whoever's website to look at that it's clear what that cost is before they get into the program. And by the way, you owe us another this.
And Marlon, just to feed off of what you're saying, is I think really what we have is a two-prong issue. First is, what fee is assessed to every student, regardless of who's paying for it? What is the fee? And then the narrative really supports but if you're in these certain situations, somebody else covers it. So I think we kind of have two things going on that I don't think we're going to solve with one document, because that would get very, very messy. So I don't know if everybody else is hearing that.
I do just want to clarify real quickly. And Greg, I see your hand up, and I'm going to switch it over to you as soon as I'm done jumping in here. A couple of things. The fees that we post on the website, we also include in that explanation that anyone looking at those fees must contact the college directly to verify exactly what those fees are. So we know that there will be some times where there are a few fees that are listed, but they are being offset some other way. And the theory there is kind of, you want that to be a good news story rather than, hey, guess what? There's a fee. You get to say, oh, you know what? You go to, Marlon, to your point, you go to Field Kinley and they are covering that fee. So student XYZ, you don't have to worry about that. We want to under promise and over deliver, if it were. The current guidance right now is the fees that are being submitted to be reviewed by the TEA should be applicable to such a large portion of your high school students that the student who doesn't pay the fee is the exception. So we want it to be the not the exception. We will kind of want it to be the rule. The other piece, and after Greg jumps in, I want Carla to jump in, because I believe that Garden City has gone through this specifically, where there are a large number of their fees that are covered in some other way. So they have removed those from the fees that the TEA needs to review and approve. So they're not even being seen because they have other ways to scholarship, uh, credit, and so on and so forth. And they have a methodology that they're using so that those are not fees that a student even expects really to see, because that is the rule. That is typically how these work. Anyway, I wanted to provide that real quick. And Greg, now you're not right in front of me. Greg, do you still have your hand up? Okay, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Sherman. So I think one of the things, if I go back to Member Rice's question, I think the most important part about the schedule of fees is that it provides the transparency that we're all looking for, including the institutions. Because I want to know if my institution is within the boundaries of what everybody else is charging. So if we're charging something that is, or if we're listing something as a charge that nobody else is listing, I'm probably going to go to my program people and say, why are we doing this? So it's important, I think, from a comparative standpoint, but it's also important from a transparency standpoint. We all should report this same kind of information to the Board of Regents, the TEA, and so forth. And that's one of the frustrations that I think we all experience when we're not sure what those things are. As far as the narrative, Member Rice, I agree and appreciate your thought. It should be a positive thing that goes out from the body that, hey, we have great support in technical education. We compile it all together and we have this much support going to paying for, the fees or other costs to help students learn. So I think everybody would be really supportive about that. However, those are gathered, whether it is, scholarships through foundations or if it's a supportive company, I think it doesn't really matter as long as those kinds of things are coming to help the students with their cause. The whole idea is about access to important and valuable technical education in the state. If we don't list all of the fees, even if they're being covered by something else, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. You just mentioned about Garden City may report them differently. I struggle with those kinds of differences because if we don't list every possible fee the way we interpret it, and we talked about this last month, if we don't list every possible charge to the students, then we should not be ever charging them with it. I understand we need to maybe clean that up in the language, but that's the struggle. Is I'm looking at it one way, Marlon might look at it another way, but I think we all want to have the body of comparable fees out there. And the other part of it, some people won't read the narrative as much. So I like the follow-up conversation that it's not going to be X company gave this much and Y company gave this much and this foundation supported in that amount, but a collective amount.
I would just offer up real quick too. We can change that guidance back to provide all of the fees regardless of how they're paid for. A couple of years ago, we had to reopen the collection, I think 3 times, because we had a lot of discussion around when we had a scenario where, let's just say, like an auto tech program, a lot of times those tools are very, very expensive. When we started asking institutions about, hey, your fees are like $7,000 and they're much higher than what we're seeing from other institutions, we were told, well, we don't charge any fees at all to any high school students. So that's where we kind of shifted that guidance to say the fees that we need to collect and need to put in front of the TEA need to be the fees that a student needs to be prepared to pay. So all that said, and all of this feedback, we can change that guidance back to provide everything, you know, and do that. The sorting out then of what's really charged, what the student really should be expecting versus we have ways to offset this, become a much larger conversation. And we do have in the data collection, we do have the ability for institutions to provide more information in their description. So perhaps that would be an avenue to pursue.
After listening to the institutions and Greg and Marlon particularly, I've changed my mind since the last meeting. Last meeting, I thought whatever the students are paying, we should submit it. If there's a program where all the fees are covered by somebody, we shouldn't have to approve that. I've changed my mind on that after listening. I think all the fees for all the programs should be included, regardless of whether they're paid by the student or not. That way you can see apples to apples. And if there's a way then to, in a note or a narrative, to say, this is what the fees are for this program, but 100% of the kids in this program are getting their fees paid by the foundation. But I think that's still the right way to go now. I don't know what the other TEA members think.
No,
I
I
agree, David.
this is Todd. I agree with you, David, that I think if we can get to some version of a structured reporting from the institutions, right, on the fee, regardless of whether it's covered by a scholarship or industry, from an approval standpoint, I guess that's what I would think we would want to see. And then if, we can identify in comments or a separate column out maybe to the right of it, that it's just for our awareness that it's covered by a full or partial scholarship of some sort. From an approval standpoint, I feel like that's what we would want to know. Because I think you were saying, Charmin, that it doesn't sound like the approval of the fees dictates how these schools can market the fees. Those are not synonymous, right?
Right. So, and I do see Carla. Carla, I'm hoping you can still hear me. I think Garden City had a really specific kind of scenario, and I'm thinking that if you kind of explain how you guys handle yours, that maybe that will help inform Todd what you're talking about and what Dave's looking at.
Perfect, thanks.
Other than CNA courses, high school students do not pay any fees. However, we do, so what we call internally, we call it their free, but we want to we have to capture that expense for the institution to see what the program is costing us. So what we do is the charges go on the student's account, and then they are waived, and so those charges then go into a receivable. And then when we get the state money, easy math, let's say we have a receivable of 200,000, then we get the Excel and CTE money from the state of $500,000. We only capture the revenue of $300,000 because we're using that Excel and CTE money that's the third party. The state is the third party that is covering those expenses for the student, so that, the student doesn't have the fees for the program, but the fees are a part of the program. Hope that helps.
And so when you have modified your reporting in the KBOR collection, I believe you removed all of those fees that you're structuring that way, where the fee is charged, but then it's waived. So what we're left with when we review Garden City's fees, just as an example, is these are the only fees that a student and a parent should be preparing themselves to come out of pocket for.
Right, right. So I guess, when I'm listening to this, I guess for me, as far as I see kind of two different messages on, are we reporting, reporting what the programs cost to substantiate the reimbursement, or are we having a conversation about we want to let the students know what it's going to, the students and the parents know what it's going to cost them, because it truly is very different.
Well, I think, again, two scenarios. I don't think they're looking to us to make that decision. They're looking at your recruiting materials. And I've been out of it 6 years, but I don't think you can waive fees. I know you can't waive tuition. Something has to take that place. And so you're still charging fees, but it may be paid by your foundation or something else.
Well,
And
yes,
so you
that's
should
what we're
still
doing.
report those charges to TEA so that we can see what those fees are. And if your independent auditor is letting you do that, I'm not sure that's, again, I've been out of it 6 years, so maybe that's changed.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not, the student is being, those charges are on the student's account. So if you pulled up their billing and they took welding, the welding charges for the fees, $100 are on the billing. Then those charges are removed as a receivable to be paid by a third party. Because if you're right, we're not charging them. Fees are being charged.
But yeah, but those fees still should be reported to TEA, my opinion.
Well, we struggle because of what one of the elements that is, I think could help us all have more consistent information is what we're asking for, and maybe some additional clarification.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And Dave, that, like I said, this is a complete sort of 180 from where we were a couple of years ago, where we had very large amounts of fees being reported. And when we as staff tried to ask about what's happening with those fees, hey, heads up, institution XYZ, you're going to want to be prepared for some questions and so forth. And that's when we were told similar situations of, well, no, actually, we don't charge the students any of these fees. The students don't end up having to pay any of these fees. So what we were attempting to do with the guidance and the collection is to get the fees that require approval by the TEA, because they are fees that the student and parent need to be prepared to pay, getting just those fees in front of the TEA. So it sounds like we kind of want to backtrack a little bit and take another swing at that. And the guidance should be changed to provide all of your fees, everything that could apply, no matter how they're paid for. And then the institutions will need to add additional information into their descriptions, as well as maybe an overarching narrative of, we have this set of fees handled by this business and industry group, or something like that, that we have this group of fees that this dollar amount, and we have a number of ways that we recover that revenue, partnerships with BNI, our foundation, and go from there.
Well, Charmin, how hard would it, as a TEA member, I think I'd be satisfied if I just saw a fee number and then a little column next to it that said, um, you know, like percentage that the student actually pays. It might be 0%, in which case, frankly, we'd probably just kind of gloss over it. Knowing who the donors are and all that stuff would be nice, but I'm not sure it's really necessary to our ability to scan through and really spot stuff. I mean, the main reason we would want all the fees entered in there, it has to do with the Marlin scenario, where otherwise it looks like some aren't charging any fees for a thing and others are. At least this way it'd be apples to apples, but then an extra column that just says, kind of pre-answers that question about, you know, the kids aren't actually seeing that fee, then we probably just wouldn't pay all that much attention to those.
Yep, we can definitely find out if that is possible.
I don't know. Go ahead.
I get nervous when I hear all possible fees. I mean, there's a list of definitions of what they can charge and what they can't. And every program has requirements for materials and equipment and so forth. So everything that's required for the student to complete that program, that fee should be listed, in my opinion, regardless of who pays. And I don't care who pays. I'm not interested in who, but I think to capture that dollar amount would be helpful and be good public relations. But when you say all possible fees, you know, that makes me nervous, because that you get into the broken window, the damaged book, and those type of things, which is not what we're wanting to collect.
Right. Yeah.
And to your point, Dave, when I'm saying all possible fees, I'm saying from the approved list. That's what I mean. When I say all possible, you know, all of the fees that could be applicable from that approved list.
Yeah, this is Ray. I see two things. One is the reporting information, and that's from the institutions to staff. And then, but then the other thing is the marketing of this program. That's going to be very different, or can be very different. And it's the, you know, so we're talking to two different audiences there. One is, you know, the TEA, maybe legislators, but TEA certainly, of all the reporting information that would be necessary or required. But the other side of that is the marketing of that program to students and parents. And I agree, I don't need to know specifically who paid what as a third party, but just again, a dollar amount, a percentage, but something that gives evidence of clearly there is wide support for technical education in this program. That's all. You get further into the weeds, legislators, their eyes glaze over and they misinterpret. So it's a matter of broad strokes in the marketing, not only to parents and students, but also in our explanation to legislators. So I don't see, for me, I'm fine with reporting all of the fees, because that's what the reporting would say is appropriate or necessary. But then you step into the world of how, you know, of really marketing the program, and that's going to vary from institution to institution. I mean, you know, we're not trying to get everyone wearing the same uniform here, but certainly we know there's going to be differences. That's just life. And so, as you know, one institution has support from a group that another one does not, so what? You know, that's life. But at least I think, are doing a better explanation or justification of how those programs are marketed by institution to institution. So it's not my, you know, thought or desire that the marketing has to be exactly the same. from institution to institution. The reporting is another side of the coin, that yes, that's typically going to be, some less disparity in that reporting information. So I mean, it's both of those things. The TEA, perhaps our focus is more in the information and the reporting. It's and it's up to the institutions how they choose to market the program to the parents and the students. And I trust that makes sense.
I agree totally.
I do think that it does. So just for staff, for our clarity, I'm sort of maybe interpreting two different things here. So we want to shift to the institution should report all of the applicable fees from the approved list if they are applicable in some way.
And
then
must be incurred somehow in order for that student to get through the class. Maybe they're not incurring them, but they're not optional either. That's what we're focused on.
okay.
That's what you mean, right?
Right. These are the,
Okay.
yes, this is what the student is gonna have to have. And then Curtis, you were talking about for each of the fees, maybe a column next to it that says, okay, here's what the fee is and here's what the student actually pays.
Well,
And
yeah,
I might be
I don't want to overcomplicate it, but yeah, to me, sitting there going through this thing, on the one hand, we want to be able to skim down it and not see a bunch of big dollar amounts here and then a bunch of zeros, from the other institutions. On the other hand, we don't want to waste our time saying, how come you're charging $500 for that, and keep getting told, well, we don't. So it seems like some other little indicator that just says, oh, okay, they've accounted for $500, but in fact, this one is being picked up some other way. There's a check mark, and then all right, we could just go right on down. That's all I'm saying, just for the simplicity of review and focusing in on what we, kind of really want to be caring about on
there. Greg, you just chatted out a question. Can you explain that a little more in detail, what you're asking?
So in our meeting last month, we talked about, we don't charge a book fee, but if the student destroys or loses the book, we do charge a fee. I'm just trying to we're not talking about listing that on the list of fees, correct?
Correct.
We had talked about that being kind of that's a separate thing, not really a fee.
Correct.
But we also had the comment in the last meeting about, well, if you're required to have safety equipment like boots, you may bring your boots in, your steel-toed boots, but if you don't have them, we can get them for you for the fee. How do we address that? I don't know that that's really something that, we want to report that somehow, that these things are required, but don't necessarily have to have an additional cost at that moment.
I think it has, unless you really want to get in the weeds, I think it has to be, if boots are required for that program, you list the cost of buying them through you. Student has the option to go anywhere else.
And
but
that's where that
the only way we can nail down the cost,
right,
without having, going all through the weeds, is just what it would cost if it came through you.
Yeah. So there were some schools that do not have tool sets for their students, and others do. And so, as Member Frederick made, the point earlier, that's just life. Sometimes you have it. Now, we do know there are resources, and I know Dr. Brown's on here, and we can get that. And that's probably part of the resources we've used over the years to get those tool sets. So it may take a little time, but it sounds to me like everybody has at least the ability to do that in the near coming future, or they already have those. So the tool parts, unless it is some of the programs where they have to go out with the tool set when they leave, then those may be charged. Does that sound, I mean, I think everybody's apples and apples here.
I think that sounds correct to me.
Okay.
This Marlon, I would agree with that assessment.
Right. I'm
We're getting
pretty
close to the end.
confident we're all in a agreement. I mean, from the peers, my peers, across all the colleges.
And
think we
Greg
all
and
kind of
Marlon,
agree.
wouldn't that be one of those things that you put on your marketing sheet? So let's say boots, the boots, for example. Your marketing sheet should somehow say, or in advising, you need to
Correct.
have those. If you don't, we can help you get them, but you should have those. You should come into the program with those already. So that goes into that advising piece,
Yeah,
or that
Yes.
marketing piece.
I think so. We provide, and I know a lot of other schools do, they provide a tool list. When the student makes the inquiry, they provide them with a tool list. And that tool list includes their PPE, as well as any things that they're responsible to have when they come in.
Well, we're getting close to the end of time here, and I don't want to cut anybody off, but one possible way going forward is to take what we've had in discussion these first two meetings and not trying to pile on extra work to Charmin, but I think you sent out the training materials or the instructions for people to fill out, institutions fill out this report. Would it be worth our time to have Carmen go through those, adjust it to the topics we've talked about and the consensus we've agreed on, have her send that out to us before the next meeting? We can all take a look at it. And then at the next meeting, take a look and see if we're getting close to being done on how we report fees consistently, et cetera. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, where's Charmin?
I'm right here.
Okay, have we totally confused you, or have we given you some direction?
I think that the direction sounds like we need to, we'll go back to the PowerPoint. We'll keep the list of approved fees and unapproved fees. I don't think anything's changed there. The guidance is going to be modified to include the fees and costs. And I think that it may be fruitful to also think about these in terms of costs as well as fees. I think our terminology may be, we're thinking about a fee that's actually charged, and it sounds like the costs that a student needs to be prepared for that are required are what we're trying to capture. And we're going to remove some of the language and some of the guidance about if you have another way to support these costs and fees, don't report it. And we're going to kind of move to report it all. We're going to find out what's possible on our data collection with our data research and planning team, as far as doing a separate, here's my fee and here's the percentage that the student actually pays. That may actually be something that each institution needs to include with each fee in their narrative instead. But yeah, I think I'm clear. So we'll modify that. We'll send that out and we'll see how that matches up.
Sound right, David?
Yeah, that sounds okay to me. And then as all of you get that, especially institutional representatives, take a look at that and let's start a conversation by email or whatever, and get it honed in so by the next meeting we can take a look at it and be close to being finished. Okay. I think Curtis had to drop off, so I don't know if it's up to me to adjourn the meeting, but
Yes, he did. And I would say that that is accurate. It would be up to you at this point.
Okay, anything else? I don't want to cut anybody off. Anybody else has other comments? If not, thank you, and we'll wait for that email from Charmin. Thanks for joining today, especially you institutional representatives.